we have our local farmer and our local rancher, and I tell people, man, there's going to be a time when you wished you started that relationship, because while they can scale their production, the amount of animals that they slaughter, they can do that to a certain extent. But if it gets too saturated, they're going to have to say, sorry, existing customers only. And so if you don't have that existing relationship, you're going to be out left in the cold, and you're going to be a victim of whatever the next, supply chain issue is. And you're right. Like, my buddy was getting his, I got one of my clients, I got him on ground bison, and he was just buying it at Costco. And he ended up going to a rancher because the Costco price ended up, he had a discount, a coupon with the rancher, and it was cheaper with the rancher than it was with Costco bison. Not to say, bison is going to be less of a risk of, all the crap that we see going on in the feed operations. But like, still, man, it's amazing how, it's becoming more and more clear. The more natural you go, the more local you go. Even just supporting domestic producers that, may ship it to you, because I got Central Nebraska buffalo. I got them with the relationship with my local farmer. So now he's stocking it, but I'll still buy like big packages from them. But if I need to pick something up, I just go to his place and get some. But it's nuts, man. And people are still, it's just habitual, your habits and, what you're used to. And you got to break free of that, because I hate the fact that people don't change until they're forced to. And when that happens, it creates massive bottlenecks. That's where people get like nervous, and like all of a sudden there's no toilet paper, so.
Oh, the woes of no toilet paper.
I know. Oh my gosh. And it's crazy how because we've been dealing with this in Florida since the 90s, but maybe the early 2000s, where every hurricane season, people still fall for it, where they're like, hurry up and go get your water bottles. And all of a sudden, people got like, a year's worth of water bottles and all this crap for things that never happen, and I'm already like, how much are they paying the news stations? How much is Publix and all these other places paying the news stations to tell them to create a run on these things, man? It's crazy.
The preppers were way ahead of the curve on all this. Everybody mocked the prepper kind of movement circa 10 years ago. Now they're looking pretty darn smart.
I totally agree. I think, like, I read this really good article. There's this guy named, oh man, I'm forgetting his name now. Well, I forgot his name, but he wrote an article called Doomer Optimism that I highly recommend, because he bought into this crap early on. Oh man, I hate that I forget his name. He was like famous for like,
I'm looking it up.
Yeah. See if you can find it. Tucker Max. And I remember hearing about him. Yeah, I highly recommend reading that article for anybody listening to this or watching this. I think it's a great thing to look at, because this guy, he talks, it's awesome when you see someone, because I got friends who, they lived in New York City or they lived in LA, and so it's easier to get caught up in the hoopla, like when you live there, because everybody around you is bought into it. But this guy had the courage to say, you know what, I was wrong, and I wish more people would be like that. But what he says, which is, I think the prepper mentality, I think it's got to change. The new prepper is someone who's not prepping for this crazy event that's going to be a short-term thing that might get resolved. I think the new prepper is someone who says, I need to prepare for a different way of life forever. And that's where we need to, of course you need to have like, simple things like, fire starters, a simple book on edible plants, water filtration, things like that. But then at the same time, you just need to prepare your body and your mind for a different lifestyle. That's the biggest pandemic that there could be, because like people are just not ready. I think the fear is not the actual happening of it, because the actual happening of it, humans are resilient. You see in history, people adjust, but the before and the beginning part, that's where the madness happens, because people are just they're gonna be so caught off guard. And you know, I'm if you look at the article, he talks about, it's like, listen, rip the Band-Aid off and just assume that what's the worst that can happen? Someone tells you 2 years from now you're insane. You know, I'd rather be the insane guy than being unprepared. You know, and there's simple things. I look at it this way: even if nothing happens, it's good to be prepared. It's good to teach my kids how to be prepared. You know.
Yeah. As watch Naked and Afraid, you learn a lot because they.
That's really good for the vegans, because all the vegans become carnivores and Naked and Afraid.
Yes, it's funny how your worldview changes totally when you are in survival.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a funny world we're living in. And did you ever get 9-1 Divok, by the way?
I got a positive test for that in September of 2020. So
Okay.
I got it early on. We basically we went to Mexico. We went to Mexico 4 times that year because we've always loved traveling. And that back then, not anymore. Back then, Mexico was like a haven. You know, it was like a place where you could go. Even though Florida was always cool, Florida places, you know, I got kicked out of Buffalo Wild Wings. I got kicked out of a few places, but for the most part, you know, if I was at Target and someone said, you know, put on your thing, yeah, and I, you know, I remember Mauda, someone said it to her. It was like a kid, you know, and he's like, well, why aren't you wearing that? And she's like, why? Why would I do that? And he's like, well, there's a sign. It's like, well, who cares if there's a sign? You know, like there's all, you know, if they put a sign, it's like what your parents used to say. You know, if everybody jumped off the cliff, would you do that? So we came back from Mexico, and then I flew to Austin to film some stuff with Logan and all those people for BioCoach. And I remember coming back, I was like shortness of breath, and I was feeling like body aches. And then the second day that I felt body aches, I was like, because the first time I was like, man, did I train that hard? I don't remember training that hard. And then the second day I was like, okay, I didn't train neck. I don't remember training neck. So why is my neck so sore? And then all that we did was for 10 days, hit the vitamins hard. Obviously we did the things we were supposed to do. We didn't go anywhere, but I did walk every single day for like 30 minutes. I remember interesting, you know, I had a pulse oximeter, and my oxygen would get down to like 91, 92. And then I would breathe intentionally for like 2 minutes and it was back up to 98. It's amazing, the connection.
Yes.
It's like how much your mind can make these things worse. And I'm not saying that there's obviously people have gotten very, very sick, you know,
Yeah.
And people have died. But I think, number one, having that mentality that, number one, just knowing that your body, when your body detoxes, you know, there's gonna be symptoms, you know, and for us it was like the kids had it for a day, and Dean, my littlest one, he wanted to have no sense of smell, so he said he didn't, but I think he was lying. You know, he just wanted to feel included. But yeah, we had it. Ever since then, we haven't gotten tested, so I wouldn't know if we had it or not. My parents, on Christmas this year, my dad was like, we got positive tests. And I was like, okay. He's like, well, you don't care? I'm like, I want to see you. And besides, if I don't have the current thing, might as well get it over with now. So come on over.
Well, even the Alphabet Soup organization is now saying, oh, yeah, get it. That's just as good as the hokey pokey. Like,
Yeah.
that been? Like, why did it take 2 years to make that declaration to the world?
Because it has to be expedient. It has to be, you know, when the damage is done and when you got everything going. I mean, just the amount of things that happened, like the best AI in the world wouldn't be able to figure out which combinations of genes would have a bad reaction. You know,
Yes.
there's just too much variation in our genes. And so, like, to me, that's way scarier. I know just a few genes, you know, like I forget which one it is, GSPT, I think, which is like detoxing heavy metals. And then COMT, you know, I'm like, I'd never touch any of that, man, because I as it is, I do my sauna daily to detox from any exposure, just from stuff in the air. Forget about things that I don't even know about. They've never been approved, you know? So to me, that's the real risk, you know, is putting things into your body that are altering your DNA. And all of a sudden we got HIV, and it's like,
And to this day, Danny, still under emergency use authorization. Like, people wake up.
still, and they keep going lower and lower with the ages. My concern now, because someone, I think he's on here, Mitch, was asking, have any of those actually gotten, you know, the real deal? And I was like, no, but they're going to push to put it on the schedule. And if you put it on the schedule, then it becomes like a de facto approval, you know, because it's like, well, it's on the schedule. There's ways around everything if you really want to break the law, unfortunately.
Well, the pandemonium, I mean, it's all but over. You don't even hear it being talked about. Is what's
Yeah. Praise
I
God
don't
for that.
yeah. Like, all right, what about this was a pandemonium of the unhokey pokey? I mean, that pissed me off to no end, right?
Oh my gosh.
Like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. How are we, who are taking care of our bodies and have body autonomy and make this autonomous choice not to put something in our body that we don't feel comfortable with? I haven't gotten it. I haven't gotten 9-1 Divock. Preemptively in March 2020, just based on what I've known interviewing people for years, Danny, I started taking pretty high dose vitamin D as a prophylactic.
Yeah.
And for a little while until it's built up in my system. I've got robust vitamin D, and then I'm doing all these biohacks that we mentioned earlier. And I'm out and about. I don't wear a face diaper anywhere. I don't do anything to avoid people. I've been at a lot of public events. I recently had my 50th birthday party and had lots of people there and hugged and all the things. Like, I'm living life as if there is no pandemonium, and yet there's still people still wearing all the face coverings and still doing all the things. And it's like, is that going to be our life the rest of of our lives?
I think there's it's interesting to see like how much our research on homeschool that we've done forever, because we've always homeschooled, the parallels between what I already knew and now. For example, John Taylor Gatto, he's like our favorite homeschool guy. This guy, for anybody who's interested in learning about homeschool, this guy was New York City, New York State Teacher of the Year. He wrote Weapons of Mass Instructions and Dumbing Us Down, really good books. And he makes this analogy of like, if you put fleas in a bucket, they'll start trying to hop out, right? But if you cover the bucket, then they'll stop. And then you can take the cover off. It's kind of like, you know, tying a baby elephant to, you know, a table. So I think that's what's happening with a lot of people. And in that case, I have no ill will to those people. I do have a little bit of pity for them because, you know, if it's like, if they truly believe that, I feel bad. A lot of people don't have the ability to say, you know what, I was wrong. But I still hold no ill will. It's funny because everything that you and I have always talked about has always been, hey guys, we're trying to just tell you the truth. And it's like, usually the people who try to tell the truth are the ones who are attacked. And it's interesting because back in the day, you know, 70s, 80s, 90s, starting with the 60s, you know, it was cool to be anti-establishment. It was cool to question things. Now it's so weird. It's like, it's cool to tell people what they're supposed to do. And I don't know where that happened. It's been a long journey, but like, I wish we could get back to that, because I think that's part of our DNA as Americans, is to like question things. You know, that's why we're like, well, what do you mean disarmament? You know, that's what happened in my home country of Cuba. Like, people were disarmed, and now look at where they